Good afternoon, and welcome to the third meeting of the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council 9, which I formally declare to be open. Today, we will be hearing from the working group co-chairs on their progress. Before we begin, I ask that everyone on Teams turn off their video and microphone except when they are speaking. Questions or comments on the presentations from CSRIC members are encouraged and welcomed. If a member has a question or a comment, those at the FCC should turn their tent cards sideways, and those on Teams should use the hand-raising function. With that, I turn the meeting over to Todd Pyatt, our co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and welcome, and thank you everybody for attending. I know it's over the holidays. We have lots going on, and not just in the working groups with all the work, but also at the family life, so I appreciate all the time that everyone's put into this. I'm going to open with the roll call here. And I would like to ask that those that are attending as an alternate, when I call the name of the primary, please respond at that time with your name and who you're attending for. Mike Barnes.
Present.
Richard Barron.
Present.
Alexander Blasgen from the CTA. Alexandra. Wade Buckner.
Present.
Douglas Campbell. Douglas Campbell. Brian Daly.
Present.
Andrew Drozd.
Present.
Luis Eduardo. Luis Eduardo. Paul Eisler. Paul Eisler. Bob Everson. Bob Everson. Craig Fugate.
Here.
Thank you. Michael Gerber. Michael Gerber. Natnael Hobtesian. I'm sorry for messing that one up. Hoptison of Lumen. Natnael. Michael Hayes.
Present.
Puneet Jain.
Hey, this is Abhijit Kolekar for Puneet Jain.
Okay, great, thank you. Ankur Kapoor.
John Hunter representing Ankur.
Thank you. George Kellerman. Thank you. Young Kim.
Present.
Thank you. Lauren Kravitz.
Patrick Arsenault representing Lauren.
Thank you, Patrick. Jason Livingood. Jason Livingood. Martin McGrath.
Present.
Thank you. Leah Misseldine.
Present.
Thank you. Douglas Montgomery. Douglas Montgomery. Jared Owen. Jared Owen. Michael Regan. Michael Regan. Travis Russell. Travis Russell. Narrowthumb Saxena. Narrowthumb Saxena of U.S. Cellular. Rickon Thacker.
Present.
Thank you. George Woodward.
Present.
Henry Young. Henry Young? Was there anybody who joined after I started roll call that's on that didn't get checked off?
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Sorry for being late. My name is Narottam Saxena. I'm with US Cellular.
Okay.
Yeah, and hi, this is Bob Everson with Cisco. I got bumped off, but I'm back now.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is Sean
Susan.
Scott. I'm sorry, this is Sean Scott with Secular. I wasn't called. I am present.
Did I miss one?
So if you're on Teams, we,
Oh, checked off.
in order to try and speed up the roll call, we marked the folks who were on Teams prior to the kickoff of the meeting. So you are marked as present if you were on Teams when the meeting started.
Yeah, sorry about that. If I didn't,
Join late, Tim Schramm, present.
And Mike Regan from TIA here as well on Teams.
okay. Great. Anyone else? Perfect. Thank you very much. So without further ado, we'll join in, and I'd like to welcome Working Group 1 with Vijay and Jason to present, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'll be presenting on behalf of my co-chair, Jason. So I would like to thank the CSRIC Council and the working group members, both online and in person, for an opportunity to present an update on the work that has been going on in Working Group 1. Could we go to slide 1, please? Should I share or? Great. So during the September Council meeting, my co-chair Jason had presented the challenges as the working group started to take stock of the work ahead. These challenges are enumerated on the slide, and these challenges attempt to answer the fundamental question of how does AI/ML affect the security and reliability of communication networks, and how to mitigate the challenges that arise. So next slide, please. To address these challenges, we created the diagram that you see here with the 4 quadrants representing specific areas that the working group would examine closely. The complexities that arise from these challenges are now well known to the working group, and with your permission, I would like to take a few minutes to appraise the council of these complexity, which arise from the 3 different sources that you see here. The first source is the technology itself. AI/ML is very broad. It encompasses everything from simple linear regression models to the sophisticated large language models in use today. Each model is different in the way it works from others, the type of data it requires for training, and the kind of harms that can arise when the model's predictions are wrong. For example, the impact of a linear regression model that fails to predict whether a customer called the contact center to pay a bill is much less than the impact of a model used to create synthetic voice of a celebrity or a politician for malicious purposes. The second source of complexity is our telecommunication network. Just like AI/ML, the telecommunication network is not a monolith. If we decompose what we call 5G, we will discover that it is composed of the radio access network, the backhaul network, the core network, and the 5G business and operations support systems. At each decomposition, different AI/ML models may be needed. For example, predictive models can aid in network slicing in the 5G RAN, radio access network, and core, while generative models can help for business and operation support systems. To add further complexity, the 5G network is distinct from the wireline network, where AI ML is also being used, and the 5G network also supports IoT networks, which do not carry subscriber traffic, but device traffic, and have requirements of AI of their own. The third source of complexity arises from how to wield a really fine scalpel to understand what to secure in what we call AI/ML systems. Existing literature for securing AI/ML system focuses on general patterns, data poisoning, which is the manipulation of training data to compromise the model's accuracy, model extraction, which is reverse engineering the model to gain insights into its internal workings, and model manipulation in the form of prompt injection and membership inference. These are well-known attacks. For a certain class of models, such attacks are perhaps not as pertinent in the telecommunication network for the following two reasons. One, the training data belongs to and is curated by the service provider, making it hard to perform data poisoning by adversaries for the simple reason that the data is not available out in the open. Two, the model is hosted in the service provider's network, not on the public internet, thereby making it inaccessible to adversaries for model extraction and model manipulation. That said, there is a different class of models, especially the foundation class models like large language models and voice synthesis models, that are trained on common data over which the service provider has no control. For this class of models that are deployed in service provider networks, we must understand their promise and perils while insulating them from doing harms to the service provider's network. So given these sources of complexity, our focus, therefore, has been on understanding the correctness of the models and analyzing the harms caused by the model's misbehavior. We intend to critically examine the intersection of AI/ML with the different areas that make up the telecom network. And our goal is to examine how AI/ML increases the threat attack surface in very key areas, keeping the complexity I described in mind, and strengthen how AI is used to support and optimize the communication networks. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And one more. Great. So since we first met, I'll give you a little bit of the lay of land where we are going now. As before, we have 33 members and 15 alternatives. By October 2nd, all of the Working Group 1 members and alternates were cleared. And on October 3rd, the working group had its first meeting to prepare for the work, especially since the first deliverable was due 5 months down the road in March 25. This deliverable will report on the threats posed by AI/ML systems to the security, reliability, and integrity of the networks and recommendations on how to overcome them. We believe this is a complex task, and I hope I have imparted the reasons for the inherent complexity to the council members over the last few minutes. But let's move on to the progress of the working group towards its goal. As I said, we've been meeting weekly since October 3rd. In order to move the work ahead more quickly, we've had one interim meeting. The editor team has been identified for the first report or the first deliverable, and they have been working on filling in the introductory and background sections into the report such that they are there as common for all of the other stuff that is going to follow. The work has been divided into 13 technical areas. Next slide, please. So at the top right, you see the quadrant that I presented earlier. So these 4 quadrants were decomposed into these 13 areas that you see. The threats for consumers includes what we call technology area, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these technology areas, the ones that you see in yellow. The threats in deployed networks, you can see below that, 5G OSS RAN, backhaul, network interconnection, and wireless networks. 6G networks and public safety network follow, but 6G networks and public safety networks have later deliverables. So right now we are focusing essentially on the green and yellow technology areas that you see. Each technology area has a technical lead, and the technical lead, along with the members of that technology area, together are trying to move the work ahead. From a chair's perspective, Jason and I are trying to be as least prescriptive as possible, such that ad hoc or organic conversations can arise between the technology areas, and they can move the work ahead with the guidelines that we have in the working group. Next slide, please. So the goal of these technology areas is essentially to come up with certain recommendations after looking at 2 or 3 scenarios that are representative of the use cases and the risk that is posed by AI ML in a particular technology area. So again, trying to foster more inter-team communications, Jason and I decided that the first order we want to do is to just have folks talk among themselves. After all, the working group members are the experts in that specific area that they have chosen to participate in. So talk among themselves and come up with maybe 3 or 5 scenarios where AI ML is being used in that area, and understand the risks as well as the benefits of the use of AI ML in that area. Once that happens, we will take about 2 to 3 scenarios that are representative of the use of this technology in the area and flesh it out further to lead to the report and the recommendations that will follow. Next slide, please. So what you see is the high-level schedule. We are sitting somewhere between December 16th, the row that has December 13, and the row that has December 16 to January 14. We are, with all technology areas, done with the first high-order goal, which was to come up with about 3 or 4 scenarios and have the TA or technology area members discuss it among themselves to generate ideas, to see how AI ML is being used, and to see how we want to mitigate some of the problems that arise. We are now in the phase where we are doing a second order deeper dive into the representative scenarios. And the goal is by January 15 to submit, each technology area will submit a first draft to the editors, and the editors would then start incorporating them into the master document that'll comprise of the first deliverable. We are expecting that pens down will be on February 7th. So after the holiday season is done and everybody is back, we will continue full force, looking at the second order deliverable and producing. Each technology area will produce its documents. By February 7th, each technology area should have fleshed out the documents. They then go to the editor starts incorporating them, and we hope to have the final draft delivered to Zenji by February 28th. So that's our high-level schedule. Next slide, please. Here is just some insight into the detailed schedule that Jason and I are preparing and following up with the different team leads, technology area leads, such that we can get the work done by January 15th and into the editor's hands to go through some more review iterations. So this is, I'm not going to go through each row. This is just an insight for the council members to look at. Next slide, please. So as another insight, I'm going to present these 2 slides. Again, these are pretty dense slides, so I'm not going to go through them. But this gives the council members an idea of our approach to manage this complexity. Excuse me, as you can see, we are itemizing the use cases. And for each use case, we are seeing what the AI is doing with respect to that use case in that specific technology area. What is the threat? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And then we focus on how to mitigate these risks. So what you see in the current slide is a more in-depth analysis of the radio access network, specifically for one use case, energy saving use case where AI ML is being used. There's other use cases, network slicing comes to mind. So every technology area is has undergone this exercise. The next example, next slide, please, is from business support systems. And here, as you can imagine, whereas the previous slide showed you predictive AI being used in business support systems, there is going to be a good use of Gen AI. So we are trying to analyze where Gen AI is being used in business support system, in operating support systems, again, to understand what the AI is doing, what are the risks, what are the rewards, and how to mitigate the risks. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that was my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Vijay. Are there, it's a broad spectrum of things that you're covering. Are there any areas in particular that you need some additional subject matter expertise from the broader council, or any requests for help from them?
We have tried to get some subject matter experts to come and give certain talks. Those discussions with those SMEs are still proceeding. At this point, I believe there has been some talk in the working group itself on whether certain things like IoT are in scope, because we may not necessarily have the expertise, but later discussions have indicated that we will discuss IoT. We might discuss it to some depth, but we might also open it up later on for for us a future CSRIC to look into it with some more, with more in depth. But right now, I believe we are okay. If Jason and I feel that we could use the council's input somewhere, we would definitely reach out through you. We are in constant touch with Zenji as well, so we would definitely reach out if we feel that we would love to have your help.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move to the next working group? Right. Fantastic progress, thank you. Working group 2, Brandon and Stephen.
Yes, Brandon Abley will present. And excuse my energy level. I'm in Thailand right now. It's about 1:30 in the morning. I'll wait for the slides. Okay, thank you. So this is CSRIC 9, Working Group 2, ensuring consumer access to 911. Back to the start, please. Ensuring consumer access to 911 and all available networks as technology evolves. This is our December 18th, 2024 report, and the co-chairs are myself, Brandon Abley, and Stephen Hayes. So in total, to premise, the work group is making really good progress. This is a review of our milestones. We have our first report on our recommendations and best practices for connecting stalled 911 calls through alternative network options, which is due June 2025. And we have our second report, which is due nearly a year later, the report and recommendations for preventing adverse impacts on PSAPs and NG911 from 911 calls made through alternative network options, which is due in March 2026. Next, please. This is a list of our members. I will not read the full list of the members. That's not necessary at this meeting, but please take note. And here we have our alternates. So in terms of the overall work, it's proceeding at a good clip. We have our entire reports 1 and 2 outlined. We have between 5 and 10% of report 1 already drafted by my estimates. We have contributions in progress for about 1/3 of the full report, and to clarify, that is the first report. Our group meets weekly. Our meetings are energetic and effective and collaborative. A lot of us have known each other for a long time, and we're able to work well together. It's just a really great team, and I don't have better words for that. However, the meetings are paused right now. It's the holidays. We will resume in January. We did not meet this week. We did not meet last week, other than to finalize what we were going to present at this quarterly meeting. Next, please. Here we have our content heading level 1 only. This is the meat of what we will have in our first report. We have our technical background, a lot of information about next generation 911, and kudos to our colleagues at APCO for contributing a lot of material for that. We go into our backward networks available for 911, our prioritization of backup network options, our 911 alternative access scenarios, intelligent network selection, limitations in use of backup networks, callbacks, which is very important. And in NG 911, this works much differently. And it's very important that we document how this works differently and how we deal with this in the future, because it's just not quite the same. We were called to do some work on class of service and method tokens. We will document that. Those that know me well know my disdain for method tokens and how those are handled, but we will document what's there and our recommendations therefore. And finally, the information delivered to PSAPs. There are about 50 level 2 subheadings not shown here. That's just to indicate that we have a really good idea of exactly what we need to do at this first report. Again, we have about 1/3 of it assigned. People are working on it. People are drafting text. And I'm fully confident that we'll meet our goals for our due date next year. Next, please. In terms of our next steps, the first part is to review current outstanding contributions on text. That's just a laborious process, heads down, everyone looking at the same document, everyone looking at the contribution line by line. We discuss it and we get through it. This approach is taken from my standards development background and how we choose to lead the group, and so far it's been pretty effective. Our authors will continue drafting document sections. We will assign new sections as we need to so that we don't have any gaps. An important note is that we will build on work from the CSRIC. There's a typo there, not 13. Should be 8. Build on the work from the CSRIC 8 report on Wi-Fi for 911. This is because this topic came up in part of the Commission's mandate, but a significant amount of that work had already been done in the previous CSRIC, and we plan to leverage and update that work, and we just want to acknowledge that. We do want to invite experts to consult on new technologies and backup access methods. We have good expertise, but we don't know absolutely everything, and we want to invite some specialists to come in and give us ideas as SMEs. And in terms of the support that we need, the co-chairs, myself and Mr. Hayes, are very confident that we generally have sufficient expertise to complete the work. We're in really good shape in terms of who is on the CSRIC right now, but we need some ultra specialist input from some private sector partners on some really specific stuff, and we're working on that recruitment right now, and that's ongoing. Next, please. So that reaches our conclusion. I stand for any questions or comments, please.
Great. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for joining us either early or late, whatever it might be for you this morning. Any other questions? comments? Great, awesome progress, thank you. Working
Thank
Group 3, Brian, George?
Yes, hi, this is Brian Daly. I'll be giving the presentation and certainly ask my co-lead George if he has any comments to inject, please do so. So if we can bring the slides up, please. So again, this is Working Group 3, and the title of the working group is Preparing for 6G Security and Reliability. And on behalf of my co-lead, George Woodward, and myself, we'll go ahead and give the presentation. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just a review of our charter and tasks. We've been tasked to examine and address security and reliability risks that are unique to the emerging 6G networks and services. And of course, as you'll see through the presentation, the somewhat challenge for this is 6G really hasn't been fully defined yet. So we're looking into the future, looking at what's emerging as 6G evolves, and trying to identify those security and reliability risks that would be unique to this emerging ecosystem. We would like to develop a plan for the development and deployment of reliable and secure 6G networks and services that will minimize the privacy risks. And as I mentioned, 6G networks are at least 7 years from commercial deployment, but we're moving at such a brisk pace that it's important that we seek early recommendations from stakeholders that will lead to more secure and reliable networks and services. We do expect to see orders of magnitude improvements in terms of speed and latency when we look at 6G. And this will enable capabilities that could cause distinctions between the physical and cyber worlds to fade. And we will make an early foray into examining and addressing potential security and reliability risks as we look at these emerging 6G networks and services. Our milestone will be a report in December of 2025, about a year from now, that will have those potential security and reliability risks identified and make recommendations for the mitigation. We turn to the next slide, please. So I won't go through each of the members individually, but would like to thank all for participation on the calls that we've had to date and your commitment to supporting the tasks that we've been given. And I do want to point out our FCC liaison, Jeff Goldthorpe, for his active participation and help guiding us from the FCC liaison perspective. Next slide, please. And we do have a number of alternates that have been defined as well. Those alternates are listed on this slide, and again represent the companies that are participating and will be providing input into the group. If we move to the next slide, we'll just talk about the status of it. We have been holding bi-weekly virtual meetings, and when we brought subject matter experts in for presentation to the working group. To date, we've had three presentations, one on 6G threat analysis, one on considerations of the threat vectors in 6G and mitigations such as zero trust, and one on 6G sensing and security. We have a draft outline developed for the working group deliverable. And if we look at the next slide, this will present the draft outline that we have developed. There are potentially 11 sections going to be in this report. First one will be understanding the 6G timelines, use cases, architecture, and features, so that we have an understanding of what we're dealing with when we're looking at security and reliability risks. Section 2 will define the 6G threat landscape and identify the potential threats. Section 3 will go through an analysis of those threats. And in Section 4, we'll identify vulnerabilities from that analysis. Section 5, evaluate the impact and likelihood of those threats and vulnerabilities. Section 6 will look at existing controls that exist in 5G networks and how they might apply as we move towards 6G. Section 7, development of the mitigation strategies. Section 8, looking at continuous monitoring and updating to help in the mitigation, identification of those vulnerabilities and threats. Section 9, the reliability and resiliency of the 6G networks. Section 10 addresses the collaboration and standardization that may be needed to address the topics that were undertaken within the working group. And finally, Section 11, advisements and recommendations that we will be making to the Commission. Next slide, please. So let me just talk about some of the initial work we've been doing to understand 6G timelines, use cases, architecture, and features. And I did present this last time, but I did want to just highlight some further work in this area. So a lot of this is driven by the ITUR timeline and process for IMT 2030. And as you can see, there are a number of steps that are involved in that, including identifying the framework for IMT 2030, looking at the requirements and evaluation criteria, the evaluation and consensus building that would be required, followed by specification development and final approval within the ITU. As you can see from the timeline, we are just in the time frame where the technical performance requirements are under development, as well as soon starting the evaluation criteria and methodology. It won't be later in 2025 till we have the final performance requirements out of the ITUR on the current timeline. And those will clearly define all the requirements that would go into the capabilities of IMT 2030 that's defined in the palette diagram as you see on the right side of this slide. Also, the usage scenarios, there are a number of areas that definitely apply to both security and resiliency in the usage scenarios, and we will continually monitor and look at those different scenarios as they apply to the work of this group. Next slide, please.
You have a spam call. I just hung up on it.
I'm sorry. Is there a question? No, I think that was background noise. Sorry. So in understanding the 6G timelines and use cases and so forth, we do note that the Release 20 SA1 6G study has started in 3GPP. The content for that release is going to be decided in the first half of 2025. And there really are two steps in Release 20 content definition. The first is the continued evolution of 5G Advanced, and the second is the new 6G work. And that is staggered, and decisions on the content of each of those will be made separately. There is a major workshop that is going to be held in March 2025. It's the 3GPP workshop on 6G that will look at the vision and priorities for the next generation, and also cover both the RAN, radio access network, the system architecture, as well as the core network and protocols. Release 20 will have the initial study items for 6G, and Release 21 will have the specification work on 6G, and also will have the radio access network submission into the ITU for IMT 2030. And the figure on the bottom right shows the tentative timelines that are being discussed within 3GPP, both for the 5G Advanced evolution as well as the 6G. Next slide, please. Even though the work is very early within 3GPP, we can get some early insights into what they're looking at as far as security related. There is a study item that has already begun within 3GPP SA1, the requirements group, And I again want to highlight that what I'm presenting here is very early and subject to change, and is representative of my initial views on what 3GPP is doing. So as far as network security, they expect cellular networks to become more secure with each subsequent generation. And as we know, the networks are becoming more complex, and 6G seems to be a convergence of disparate technologies, both on the information technology, operations, and communication side. And this does complicate the ecosystem because we have differences in approaches, threats, disciplines, and capabilities from each of those disparate technologies. The mobile communication system does need to enhance security and privacy. It does need to embrace new security paradigms, techniques, and leverage ongoing security technologies. And it's expected that cloud deployments are going to play an even more important role in 6G. Thus, the 6G network must provide trust and security mechanisms for secure access to and communication with network elements. The other area that we note is quantum-resistant security. Quantum computing technology does pose significant threats to some of the classical cryptography. The 6G system should provide security protection for communication against the potential attacks that could be posed by quantum security, or quantum computing rather, sorry. Next slide, please. The other areas that are noted is the false space station attack mitigation. False space station attacks and its potential to cause active and passive impacts are an alarming concern worldwide. So 3GPP has identified the need to increase the level of security between the radio network elements and the mobile device between the initial network selection procedure in order to help prevent false space station attacks at earlier stages of communication establishment. And again, a lot of this is going to be subject to operator policy as well as regulatory requirements. Again, 3GPP being a global specification, there are many different regulatory requirements coming in from different areas of the globe. But the 3GPP system should support a means for a mobile device or UE user equipment to be able to distinguish a false base station from an authentic base station. The next area regarding reliability is resilient positioning in satellite networks. There is a dependency on satellite networks, and especially for timing and positioning, which could result in major threats and risks in the case of unavailability or disruption of those satellite systems. And this could become because of jamming, spoofing, or just natural obstructions to the satellites. The 6G system should provide satellite access, should provide positioning service with 3GPP technologies and independent of non-3GP positioning techniques, that is, independent of satellite technologies. Next slide, please. Some of the other areas being looked at are disaster relief, resiliency when terrestrial networks are down and terrestrial mobile service is not available in the area. And they're looking at alternative available networks such as satellite access and high altitude platform system-based networks or HAPS-based access networks. And again, public warning system, which is the wireless emergency alerts here in the US, should be available to the impacted area, including when the terrestrial network is down through those alternative means. APIs will allow authorized third parties to retrieve availability information about computational resources in the network, and monitoring and reporting of computational resource usage in the operator managed network could be a potential for an area where security and resiliency needs to be considered. Other potential use cases with security implications include immersive communication, integrated sensing and communication, as well as low altitude uncrewed aircraft supervision or traffic management systems. Next slide, please. So moving forward, looking at our deliverables and schedule, we'll continue our virtual meetings on a bi-weekly basis, and we'll be bringing in subject matter expert presentations on a number of specific topics or research areas that are being scheduled. We do have our Addis workspace set up for document management and collaboration. We are looking at a two-day face-to-face meeting with a virtual option that's scheduled in January in Alpharetta, Georgia. And our deliverable, again, is the report on potential security and reliability risks in 6G and recommendations for mitigation, with our deliverable schedule in December of 2025. George, let me open it to you to see if you have any additions or any comments you'd like to add to the report.
Thanks, Brian. No, nothing to add right now. And thanks for taking us through that.
Great. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Brian. Any additional questions from the room or online? Hearing none, thank you. Great report. I'm going to pass it over to Billy Bob for our closing remarks.
Thanks, Todd, and I'd just like to echo your earlier remarks to all the members and all the working group chairs and members of the working group and the great work that you're doing. Definitely want to say thank you as we go into the holiday season and prepare. Please know that you are definitely in our thoughts for the holiday season. Hope that you have great time. But I do want to just impress just here at the last, as you all have certainly been watching in the news reports here in the last couple of weeks, the concerns certainly from the government side on national security and questionable implications as we see cyber adversarial activity, the importance of the work that you're doing, and that everything that you all are investigating right now, trying to help look at the challenges, describe those, and come up with a series of recommendations that can help the FCC and its regulator authority help move the nation forward to improving how the resilience and the security of our communications infrastructure supports that backbone. Certainly, as several of the working groups mentioned today, as you think about public safety, you think about how do we save lives, how do those emergency responders provide those mission-critical operations to save lives and protect property. But as we think about those implications at the larger level as well, to the national security considerations and how even some of those most mission-critical functions that are performed by governments really at every level, they depend on this communications infrastructure to move information, what I like to call emergency information, to support those mission-critical operations. It really starts right here with the very thoughtful and the dedicated considerations that you all are making of trying to understand, how are the evolution of networks moving and how information is planned to be moved forward. What are the kinds of considerations that create kind of a level playing field is really the way that I sort of think about, what a good regulator does is, provide a good level playing field. But at the end of the day, government's responsibility is really providing, good legislation, good regulation, but also good program investment that helps incentivize how some of the new commercial offerings come into place that eventually are intended to make citizens' lives more prosperous, but also to ensure their security as well, because prosperity is impossible if there's no security available. So thank you all very much, and thank you for giving your time, and hope you all have happy holidays.
Thank you, Billy Bob. Thank you, Todd. Thank you to the co-chairs of the working groups and for everyone who came in person today. I know this was a very short meeting. In fact, I think it might be a record for CSRIC meetings. It's largely because we only have 3 working groups, but certainly I think we can all agree that the topics that the 3 working groups have taken on are particularly important and crucial for the future of our networks and public safety. I would like to note that a longtime CSRIC member, Steve Watkins of Cox, is retiring. I believe he's on remotely. But I'd like to give him, yes? I'd just like to say thank you, Steve, for all your work over the years. We appreciate you and the efforts that you have given on behalf of CSRIC and the FCC, and we will miss you. I would also like to note that the next CSRIC meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 19th in the new year, 2025. Hopefully, I will see all of you again then. And in the meantime, happy holidays to everyone, Happy New Year, and we look forward to continued work by CSRIC in 2025. Thank you. With that, the meeting is closed.